What is up, everyone? Today is January 19th, 2024. I'm not going to say 23. You have that thing, right? Where like the first month of the year, you're still thinking in the last year. Do you still do that, or is it just me?
I do. I don't know what year it is ever. I don't know how old I
Yeah.
am. I had a birthday like quite recently, and I forgot how old I was.
Oof.
I'm not even
Yeah.
joking. Like I actually, I guess, am I this or am I that? Like, yeah, I was wrong.
You'll remember like every decade. You'll
So
remember the 30th, the 40th, and the 50th birthday, but
exactly,
everything in
exactly,
between's a blur, right?
exactly. So remembering the year like 2024, 2023, like yeah, with me, you get more than a month. You get as much time as you need.
Yeah. All right. So today we're going to be talking about, well, first of all, thanks everyone for tuning in. I haven't been doing these live streams for a little while. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes with Kinetic Finance and me and all the channel stuff, and you'll all find out about it in the next 2 months. But rest assured, it's going to be amazing. If you've liked any of my videos or content, just wait. The stuff that is in the works right now is amazing. But I want to get back into the routine of live stream. So thank you, Boomer, for joining me on this. And thanks everyone for watching. Today, we're going to be talking about, now that the Bitcoin ETFs have come out, what do we have to look forward to next? Because I think that's sometimes a thing with Bitcoiners is we always want to look forward to the next events. We're very future forward looking. We've got the halving coming up. But what is there besides the halving for the rest of 2024? We'll dig into that. We're going to talk a little bit about Javier Milei's speech to the World Economic Forum. And Boomer has a conspiracy theory about that, I think, in store there. And yeah, just a couple other things I picked up on this week. Not a super formal show. We'll have fun with it. And yeah, why don't we
As
cap it
opposed to
off
the other shows that were super formal.
where we don't have
When
fun.
when do
It's
we
very
when do we,
serious.
when are they super formal?
Very serious. I'm a very
Yeah.
serious macro analyst, and that is what this show is all about, charts. There is a chart. So the first chart I want to pull up is just to give people some like overview who might have not been following this stuff like a hawk as to, well, the ETFs came out with the price of Bitcoin dropped 10% in the last 9 days. Like why, what happened? This chart here gives a little bit of insight into it. So these are the, I think, 10 or so different ETFs. And basically, and again, there are other factors that's at play. Ultimately, price moves because of, it's being set on the margin by supply and demand. But when we look at all the different days that the ETFs have been live, there's a pattern where essentially there's the IBIT Bitcoin ETF. This is the BlackRock ETF. It's getting a lot of positive inflows. And then there's the Fidelity ETF also doing really well. They're pretty much neck and neck for the biggest ETFs. Everyone else is kind of second fiddle. There's like the second rate ones, Bitwise, ARK Invest, Invesco, and then there's a lot of small Bitcoin ETFs as well. And then you have the mammoth that is Grayscale. Now, Grayscale, formerly GBTC, also got approved to convert their trust into an ETF. They were the one that was trading at a very negative premium for a while because there was no way to kind of get your Bitcoin or get your underlying asset out of the ETF or the trust at the time. Now there is. You can just ask them to redeem. And so I'll look this up real quick. There is a GBTC premium chart. We talked a lot about this last year. This is what caused the collapse of a lot of those companies like 3 Arrows Capital back in the day. But yeah, essentially, kind of right after the peak bull market price in 21, you started getting this thing where all this Bitcoin was stuck in the GBTC trust, but not many people actually wanted the GBTC shares. They were arbitraging this positive level here for years. And then the arbitrage disappeared, and then people got really stuck in the negative. They had to liquidate these shares, but GBTC wasn't actually selling the underlying Bitcoin. So the shares traded at this massive negative premium, kind of peaks here right around the end of 2022, grinds kind of sideways for most of 23. And then around the time that GBTC looks like they're going to win their lawsuit, the premium starts grinding higher because it looks at that point that, well, if they're going to win this lawsuit against the SEC, then they're going to have a chance to turn it into an ETF, which means we're all going to be able to redeem in the end. And sure enough, now it's just trading at a negative 0.4% premium. So congrats to everyone.
Just a quick thing here. I'm not an expert on the GBTC stuff, and I'm not 100% sure. Why does it trade at a premium and at a discount? So trading at a premium means that you buy one share of GBTC, and whatever value that is corresponds to a certain amount of sats, a certain amount of Bitcoin. And if it's trading at a premium, then that's more than the math shows, right? If the trust holds one Bitcoin and you hold 1% of it, then that means 1 million sats. Your share is worth 1 million sats. A premium would mean that it trades for 200 sats. And a discount would mean that it trades for 500,000 sats. Now, my understanding of it is it will trade at a premium and a discount based on what a trust is, right? They're locked up. Your money is locked up. You put your money in, not anymore because it is now converted to an ETF, but previously, up until last week, when it was inside the trust, when your money was inside the trust, you couldn't just sell anytime you want. Right?
Well, what happens is when it was a trust, there was only there was a problem because usually with ETFs, you have the decision. You can either sell the ETF in your brokerage account for cash, or you can redeem the ETF for whatever the underlying amount of Bitcoin, gold, whatever is, and then that can get delivered to you. GBTC, when it was a trust, had a one-way thing where you could send Grayscale Trust Bitcoin and they would give you shares, and then you could do with those shares what you want, but you could only really sell them for cash. You couldn't redeem them back for the Bitcoin at a later date. That was the big problem. So what was happening is because GBTC was trading at this positive premium, people would go in, they would buy spot Bitcoin, they'd send it to Grayscale, they'd get their shares in like, I think it was like a month or two. There was a bit of a lockup period, but then they just sell it for the premium on top of, whatever the Bitcoin did in the meantime. And it worked for years that way.
And there is a premium. Why? Like for what for the consumer? Why?
Because people in brokerages wanted exposure to Bitcoin, and that was the most liquid instrument for the longest time. So
with it, yes, there's
ARK Invest, for example, was a big holder of GBTC. They owned a lot of it because they wanted to expose clients within their products to Bitcoin. So they were a big buyer of it. I mean, tons of people, like they amassed $26 billion worth. And I think as that premium, kept fluctuating, but was pretty positive, it was kind of like it was like a flywheel where it just kept attracting more and more capital until there was just too much taking advantage of this premium and the trade flipped. It became a crowded trade. And then all these companies have GBTC on their books, and then they all start going bankrupt. So they're forced sellers. No one is really putting new Bitcoin in. And then thus, people are just dumping those GBTC stocks for whatever they can get, even though the underlying represents a higher value share price. As soon as
if you're just a regular holder, you don't really need the capital right now, but you sure as hell don't want to sell that thing at a loss. Right? You're going to hold on to it, expecting it to trade at par at some point, right? Because everything that I've seen over the past couple of years was that GBTC were trying to become an ETF, meaning that they would trade basically lockstep with the price of spot. Very little difference, and it would be very liquid.
There was always a little premium, but it would always the premium would fluctuate between 0 and like 20 or 30%. In bull markets, everybody wants Bitcoin exposure. They can't go to Coinbase, so they buy GBTC. And so you would see it's the same with like MicroStrategy and the mining stocks. Like right near the peak of Bitcoin price, those things have a massive premium over whatever their underlying holdings are. It's just people FOMOing into whatever Bitcoin exposure they can get. So long story short, as they got approved into an ETF, because the ETFs allow two-way redemptions, and in fact, I think they're mandated to have those redemptions daily, people said, okay, well, it looks clear, starting in like September that these ETFs are going to come. We're all pretty positive that these ETFs are going to come in the next like few months, and sure enough, they did. And so now all the Grayscale investors can get out. However, there's a caveat to this, is that if you do redeem and you want to move your dollars into another ETF, you do take like a capital gains hit. So it's not like all of the GBTC money is going to flow into other ETFs and GBTC will cease to exist. It would seem that would be the outcome because GBTC has the worst fee out of all of them. So all these other ETFs are taking maybe 0.5% management fee per year. GBTC is up at 1.5. So
and if you're GBTC, you want that fee as high as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And because you have the Bitcoin locked up already, you have the customers locked up already. So you want to keep charging them as much as possible going forward. If you're
Mhm.
an incumbent, if
Because
you're
they
new
know
to,
too that not everyone's going to sell
not
because of
everyone's
the
going to
tax
sell.
hit. Yeah.
Not everyone's going to sell. And if you're new, you want to compete based on price, because these ETFs have very little difference between them. Like there's nothing. They hold Bitcoin.
No,
right?
The only difference between
Some of them
is,
have different custodians, right? So
Yeah.
Fidelity, for example, they are their own custodian. I believe everybody else, Coinbase is their custodian. Is that right? Maybe there's one more that has something else in there.
There's only really two factors an investor would make when they're deciding what ETF should I take, besides just being marketed one over the other and only knowing about one over the other. The two factors are, what is the management fee? Because that matters, right? Like there's going to be a cut taken. Although for an asset as volatile as Bitcoin, you probably don't really notice it over the long run. But the management fee is a factor, and you saw leading up to the ETF, they were all competing to get the cheapest fees. And then the other factor is which one's going to be the most liquid, because if you're going to own an asset like Bitcoin long term, you might want to also run options on that. So you might want to get calls, you might want to hedge and sell covered calls on your Bitcoin position, depending on how big it is. And so you're not going to want to do that with one of these like straggler ETFs. And that's why ultimately I think, by the end of the year, probably, well, maybe not by the end of the year, but by the end of the next bull run cycle, so 4 years from now, I'd say, you're going to see a handful of these cease to exist, because essentially all the big ones will eat up all the volume because they have the options chains and all that stuff. So
and you're generally speaking, those ones that will have the most liquidity will be the big names. Not that there's any small names here. Like I'm looking at, like Franklin Templeton are still a really big name in the financial world, but when it comes to ETFs, they're not on the same, not playing the same ball game as BlackRock.
Yeah, exactly. One of the funny things, actually, my friend Adam, who runs Bitcoin Well, he has his company's ticker is BTCW, which was one of the Bitcoin ETFs. And I was telling him, like, I just remember 2021 where there was like a OTC penny stock called Zoom, and people thought they were buying like Zoom, the stock. And I said, you're probably going to see like a bump in your stock price, because like his stock is not traded more than like maybe 10 to a couple $100,000 a day. You're going to see a bump on people just picking the wrong ticker. And like, sure enough, his stock went up like 80% on the day of the ETF coming out. But
not financial advice, but I may or not financial advice, but I may or may not be a shareholder in Bitcoin Well, and I may or may not have experienced that like this week.
I am a shareholder in Bitcoin Well, just to disclose it, but we're not going to talk about that. But I just think it's funny. It's just like there's just psychological stuff that happens in the market, but it ties into this idea that like ultimately like the biggest ETFs are going to win. People are going to go with the leaders of the pack. And it's cool seeing basically, I think the BlackRock one was a given because of the reputation of BlackRock. They also had a competitive fee. And then Fidelity has just been such a leader in Bitcoin for institutions for a long time. They're the only one on this list, I believe. Maybe Valkyrie or another one, or Van Eck, has a different custodian besides Coinbase, but Fidelity built their own custody solution. So
Fidelity have been in the Bitcoin game for a long time. Fidelity have been mining Bitcoin, I think, since 2014.
Exactly. Not only when you buy these ETFs, is it like not your keys, not your coins, but it's not BlackRock's coins either. It's Coinbase's coins. That's a really important point, is like almost all of these, and I don't think Coinbase is going to rug anyone, but all of these companies decline to build the infrastructure to do self-custody. And I don't know what that's like, how hard it is to build a registered custodian, or what the regulatory landscape looks like for that in the US, but they all said, we're going to just give it to Coinbase. Coinbase can handle it. We're going to be doing, spot trades on their exchange and deal with their OTC desk anyway. So maybe it's just easier if they custody it. But Fidelity is basically the only one here which said, nah, we're going to handle it ourselves. Like, we are going to build the infrastructure. We already have the infrastructure. So I think that's why they're up at the pack, besides them being Fidelity, which is, a massive ETF provider as well. But yeah, like, I don't want to spend too much time on charts and math and all that stuff, but basically I'll show one more chart here. You can see these are the outflows of GBTC. So every day, anywhere between $400 to $500 million of Bitcoin are exiting GBTC. And because these ETFs, they don't let you actually like I don't want to explain the difference between in-kind and cash creation, but essentially when you exit or you say, I want to redeem my GBTC shares for something, they give you cash. So they have to go to the market and sell that Bitcoin. And then the other ETFs on the other side are getting positive inflows. So they're likely buying that dumped Bitcoin on the market. So
do
going
wash
back to
trading
this tab,
do wash trading rules apply?
I don't
Like
I don't
generally
know.
speaking,
I
in
don't
the
think
United
so.
States, you're not allowed to sell something at a loss and then buy something back right away that it's essentially the same thing.
Well, they're not buying it back. Like Grayscale's
Well,
selling and then someone else is buying that Bitcoin.
well, that's what. But I'm just saying, if you're a consumer, if you're a customer of
Mhm.
GBTC, you have X amount of shares of GBTC, and you go and you sell at a loss. Let's say you bought the top way back in 2021, and you've been holding on to all throughout the bear market. You're going to incur a capital loss right away the moment that you sell that. You still want exposure to Bitcoin, so you go and turn around and you buy the Fidelity ETF or you buy the BlackRock ETF. Are you
That
able
wouldn't be
to?
wash trading.
It's not wash trading.
No,
Because
because they're two different instruments.
but it's the same underlying asset.
But they're different instruments. Like they're different, like IBAN tickers. They have different prices for the units. So I don't think that would be wash trading. Wash trading would be like, I think if you're doing the same unit of account. I could be wrong, but I'm 100% positive that it's not considered wash trading to just sell like GBTC and then buy a different ETF. The other thing too is like we don't know when we see something that says, oh, there's $500 million in outflows of GBTC. We don't know how many of those outflows are caused by people selling shares and thus reducing the share count, and then Grayscale basically just adjusting for that, or people just saying, going to Grayscale and saying, hey, I want direct redemption for those shares. There's 0.08 BTC underlying, every Grayscale share. I want to redeem that. So we don't know, I believe, how much is split between those two pots. But essentially, I don't want to dig into this story too much because
And it's not a surprise. It's kind of techy, but this isn't surprising, right? Pretty much everybody that I was listening to was expecting to see people get out of GBTC once it converts into an ETF. Like everyone kind of knew that.
I think the positive story here to look at, besides the Bitcoin price being down, is that despite all the people trying to exit GBTC, amongst all the other ETFs, there is net positive flow into these Bitcoin ETFs. So no matter how much Grayscale selling there is, people are buying more Bitcoin than Grayscale is getting rid of through these ETFs. So that's positive. And then if you look at it too, it was like one of the biggest ETF launches of all time. There's now more capital assets under management in the Bitcoin ETFs as a group than there is in silver ETFs.
Yeah.
Right. And it took it like 5 or 6 days. And then, gold, I think there's like $140 billion of gold ETFs assets under management. And I think we're at, what is our total AUM here? 14 billion maybe on, I could be wrong here. Yeah, I think around 14 billion AUM on all the other Bitcoin ETFs. So, we're already 1/10 of all the gold ETF assets under management. Again, it's been like 5 days.
Yeah,
5 trading days or 6.
I heard on a Twitter space this week saying that the BlackRock ETF was the third largest launch in history. And they compared it to GLD, the gold ETF, the big gold ETF from how many years ago? 12 years ago? 13 years ago? It's been a little while since GLD came out. So GLD was the biggest, and it still is. But GLD came out by itself. BlackRock was launched with 10 other products that are essentially the same product. So think about the amount of competition that any single one of these Bitcoin ETFs had on day one compared to GLD. So you're right. It's one of the largest launches in history, but when you consider how much competition there was right out the gate, it's a success. You can't be anything less than a success.
Yeah. All right. Before we get into some more stuff, because I want to move on from the ETF, like the logistics of it all, and kind of talk about like, well, now what? They're here and it's looking good overall, besides the GBTC sellers. Like, what else do we as Bitcoiners have to look forward to? Before we do that, quick word from our sponsor, Beaver Bitcoin. If you don't want BlackRock / Coinbase / Fidelity to hold your coins, you do it your damn self, and you do it with Beaver Bitcoin. This week's show is brought to you by Beaver Bitcoin. Dollar cost averaging is the most stress-free method to enter the Bitcoin space. And if you're looking for a simplified way of buying Bitcoin in Canada without needing to rely on a custodial exchange, Beaver Bitcoin is your best bet. Beaver Bitcoin lets you set up recurring Bitcoin purchases directly from your Canadian bank account and straight into a Bitcoin address that you control. It's like a savings account in a currency that you actually want, or a Netflix subscription that doesn't suck. And if you don't want to wait to stack sats, Beaver Bitcoin supports instant non-custodial Bitcoin buying via e-transfer as well. Give it a shot today at beaverbitcoin.com. All right, and we're gonna throw in a giveaway. I haven't done a giveaway on this show for a while, but it's always tricky because I want to put trivia out there, but half the time when you think of trivia, you can just, you put a question out in the world and you just Google it or chat GPT it and you get an answer. I got a trickier one. And the first person who can reach out to me, whether it's through Twitter DMs, you can comment on this Twitter post or in the live chat with the answer. Whoever contacts me first, either it'll be live on this show or after the show with the correct answer, I will send them 10,000 sats. It's got to be through Lightning though. So you have to have an LN URL. You can make one with any of the Lightning wallets like Wallet of Satoshi or Blink or Coinos. But 10,000 sats, here's your question. Satoshi left Bitcoin. He stopped posting sometime in 2010. During what block number / block height did Satoshi make his last message on the bitcointalk.org forum? So you got to go find out what that last post was, the time he made it, and then figure out what the block height was at the time. Whoever can get me the first answer to that, any of the sources, 10,000 sats, it's all yours. All right, moving on. What do we have to look forward to, Boomer? What are you looking forward to? You listen to a lot of Bitcoin podcasts. You read a lot of books. I don't know if you've been following all the ordinals and everything else going on or conferences coming up. But like, what are you looking forward to as a Bitcoiner this year?
Well, the halving for sure, right? Halving in the spring.
Yeah, halving, of course.
And looking forward
to the halving party in El Salvador?
No. But I am going to the conference in Montreal. So that's
nice.
The next thing I'll be looking forward to after the halving. So that's only like a month after, right?
I will be there too.
In May. Yeah, so I'll see you again there. Like looking forward to that. Like also we were talking before the show about the American election this year. I'm not so much looking forward to the election. Like, to be honest, I'm exhausted from it already. Like the politics in general, like just drain me, and I don't care that much, but I feel I have to care. But from a Bitcoin standpoint, I do think that I'm looking forward to seeing this being the first election where I think Bitcoin is actually going to be a topic of discussion. Like I actually think it's
in what context? Like in the debates, or
maybe in the debates, maybe not. It's going to be out there. Well, I mean, maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself on the show notes, but you talked about Trump mentioning CBDCs this week. That's was it's in our show notes that Julian sends before the show. But little spoiler there. Trump talking about spoilers. Trump talking about CBDCs. So if that's coming out now, if the Americans are already talking about that, I think Bitcoin will come out as an area of interest in the election. And you were seeing, I watched CNBC, and CNBC now is almost a Bitcoin channel. Like over the past couple of weeks.
Joe Kernan?
Yeah.
Did you see those?
Joe's the best.
Joe Kernan with like Jamie Dimon, and Jamie Dimon's like, oh,
I love Joe.
Satoshi's gonna pop out of nowhere and like change like the amount, and Satoshi's like, and then Joe Kernan's like, I don't know, like it's all code. That's so great to have an ally like that in the mainstream.
Joe Kernan was my Bitcoiner of the year for 2023. Like he was my favorite Bitcoiner in 2023. I love Joe. I don't know how he does it. Like he's able to, like he clearly, I think like he's
done the work. He read the Bitcoin standard.
Yeah. And you just know that he's talking about it after the show and in when the commercials are on. But aside from Joe Kernan, it's all over CNBC. The Bitcoin ETFs was big news. Like look at the views. Like if you go on CNBC's YouTube channel and you take a look at all the video clips that they have, the ones that talk about Bitcoin are always the highest. They always have the highest view count.
Always. Yeah.
Jim Cramer, like love or hate him. Like honestly, like I know Bitcoiners hate Jim Cramer. Jim Cramer actually helped me a lot in my life in terms of understanding finance and understanding trading and understanding a lot of stuff. So I actually owe a lot to Jim Cramer. Jim Cramer's been good to me. So I don't want to shit on Jim Cramer too hard, but Jim Cramer makes a post on Twitter about Bitcoin, and he gets a ton of engagement. He talks about Nvidia, or he talks about Boeing half as much, quarter as much. So it's already skewing.
It's weird. There's like there's something called like the internet effect, or maybe I'm paraphrasing what it's actually called, where you'll see on the internet something will be very, very popular, but it won't be indicative of like what the rest of the population thinks at all. Like you can go in when Vivek Ramaswamy, he dropped out last week, when he was, doing polls, or when he was on like presidential polls, like who won the debate, Vivek every single time, right? Or, who has the highest chance of becoming president? His betting odds were way higher than like Nikki Haley and DeSantis for a long period of time. Come the primaries, like he's, that 7,000 votes in Iowa, after he's done like 300 plus events in person, all that internet support doesn't materialize in real life. And I think there's a way to like kind of communicate that through Bitcoin. Like when we see these Bitcoin videos on CNBC and Jamie Dimon says something about Bitcoin and it's like the biggest thing he says, that's like the internet amplifying that. But I don't think it represents, honestly, like any level of interest in the general public. And I think that's kind of the story here, is like we've been anticipating these Bitcoin ETFs. The finance world's sort of interested in it, but like ultimately, like no one knows or cares.
But they wouldn't be covering it as much as they are if it wasn't getting views, if it wasn't getting clicks. And that's why
true.
And this kind of goes into what we were talking about before with the ETF. And it's a question I wanted to ask you. Do you think we're going to see a Bitcoin ETF commercial in the Super Bowl? I think we will. I think we might see several.
A Super Bowl commercial costs like $5 million. And if IBIT has $5 billion under management at a 0.25% fee, they'll make like $10 million this year off of that product, unless I'm doing my math wrong on that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm doing my math wrong on that. But yeah, like if there is a Bitcoin commercial during the Super Bowl, it's going to be Bitwise, Fidelity, or iShares. I would be shocked if it's any of the smaller ones. Maybe ARK, because like I just don't think they have enough like AUM to make it worth it, unless they're making like a Hail Mary play.
I've never seen an ARK commercial.
Bet on that. I think we'll see one. At least one.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So that means something. Like that to me is there is a shift. Like I feel it. Like I feel the shift. And I know I'm just like you. Like I consume a lot of Bitcoin content, and sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, and you assume that just because you're interested in something, you think that everybody else is interested in it. I'm guilty. I'm more guilty of that than anybody. That being said, like I really think that this election, Bitcoin is going to be a topic. It really is.
I think just like freedom to transact, like, the narrative around Bitcoin ETFs is not about Bitcoin as money. It's about Bitcoin as like new gold or whatever. I think it was like Saifedean who was saying like, freedom, they vehemently defend freedom of speech, because it's like you shouldn't let like a tyranny control, one or two things. There can't be any exceptions. Either we're allowed to speak freely or we're not. But people are so much more willing to put exceptions to the freedom to transact, because they think, hey, there's bad actors, like maybe the government should control. We don't condone, child trafficking. We don't want to enable them to traffic. But when it comes to speech, then like, yeah, well, no, like we can't just exclude child traffickers from saying, certain things, like, because that would create a slippery slope where we can censor other people. But transactions are always different. People always take a back seat to that, and they say, hey, I think we should have like FINRA and all these different regulatory agencies that oversee transactions. And like that's the narrative that I think has to change for people. And if that's going to be a topic of the election, that interests me. I think you sent me a link, and it was sort of questioning like, now that CBDCs are definitely like an election issue, how do you know that you're not already using a CBDC, right? Like it's becoming a buzzword. And it was really funny. I
Yes.
watched Trump, I think it was on the same stage with Ramaswamy, say, hey, we're not going to allow a CBDC. And everyone started cheering in the crowd. And Trump was like, oh wow, you
Yeah.
guys are smart. I didn't realize this was such like a big thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
sort of is. But
so I mean,
yeah,
I'm not looking forward to this CBDC talk in that sense, and I'm not looking forward to the U.S. election very much in that sense. But from a Bitcoin perspective, I do think that 2024 is going to be a public year for Bitcoin. And I'm not even talking about price. And you know that I'm bullish. I'm very bullish long term. Like obviously, you look at all the Bitcoin stuff all over the place. I'm wearing Bitcoin merch all over. I'm a Bitcoiner. Like I am bullish. I'm a believer in this technology, and I'm a believer in this asset long term. But I don't necessarily think we're going to $1 million a coin tomorrow or even next year or 2 years from now. I don't know. And this is not financial advice. Nobody's listening to this for financial advice anyway. This is just entertainment. So I don't think number go up is the greatest marketing. Number go up is the greatest marketing. But I think 2024 could be a great year for marketing, even if number doesn't go up.
I think Bitcoin's in this sweet spot between like 35 to 60. And that's why I'm kind of like, I hope the price stays around there, because in this price range, and I can't forecast what hash rate's going to be in this price range though, like a lot of miners are actually able to make a profit.
Yes.
Even with hash going up, they can still make a profit. So the miners are eating. There isn't this massive influx of new Bitcoiners, but I mean, you can look at, I've talked to companies like Bull Bitcoin, ShakePay, all these guys, like it was a pretty damn good year last year for those guys. So there will be money for them to keep pushing what they're pushing. That always leads to people going downstream, finding the cultural products. Bitcoin trading cards is crushing it. The self-custody devices are crushing it.
How are your views? I know, I know, as a fan of yours, I'm watching your videos and I'm seeing there's more views now than there was when I first started listening to your stuff about a year ago.
I think like I focus less on mine because I have shorts and I'm not doing like a lot of long form content. It's all over the place.
There's more.
I mean, look at channels, look at other channels. Like I'll call it other creators here. Like look at British Hodl, Simply Bitcoin. These guys are crushing it. 2023 was a great year for those guys, even though it was a good year for Bitcoin price, but we didn't break all-time highs. It's like an in-between year. Those guys really grew their followings that year in a really significant way. And a lot of other Bitcoiners did, and people are still watching Bitcoin content. Like this stuff still crushes on YouTube. It was really bad in 22, near the end of 22. Yes. There was like a uptick for all the FTX drama and then like dead between December and March. And I think the content creator is doing really well right now. I've, behind the scenes, like, I'm definitely having more conversations with sponsors and Bitcoin businesses looking to create media than I was last year.
That's a good thing. Like that's bullish, right? Like that's bullish as hell.
Yeah, exactly. Ultimately, without, the NGU effect isn't in play until we break the last all-time high. Ultimately, things are still doing well besides that. There's just this sweet spot where we're not down 80%. We're not at all-time highs. And I like that area as a Bitcoiner.
Yes, me too.
I just find that interesting stuff comes out.
And
it's
what
not
a blaze.
Frothy, it's not doom and gloom. It's just kind of Goldilocks,
And a great place to stack sats.
Yeah.
Like this is like DCA heaven, right? Like if you're just stable, every 2 weeks you get a paycheck, you go for,
except with UTXO management, that's a nightmare. When I had to consolidate,
guys,
a couple of my
learn UTXO management. If you're listening to this, put it on pause. Go learn UTXO management and come back. Like we'll still be here. Like, yes, for sure.
My girlfriend Makiko had the best analogy for what UTXOs are, and I'll have to write it down because it's one of the hardest things to explain to people. Like, why are there UTXOs? Like, what? She had a great analogy. It was to do with like dollar bills and like having a bunch of bills in your wallet versus like $100 bill.
Yeah. No one wants to pay $100 bill to buy a cup of coffee, right? It's a little bit of a security risk if you're in a sketchy part of town.
But if you're DCAing, it's like you're filling up a wallet with like a bunch of oneers.
Yeah, you don't want that either.
And
and
you got
it's
to pay in
difficult
the
to
Bitcoin universe.
transact.
You got to pay every single time
Yeah.
you want to just move a dollar bill from A to B.
Yeah.
And
So
you don't want to
so
pay for
listeners,
every single
go
bill.
learn some UTXO management.
She had that analogy and it was like, it was perfect. It was perfect. I'm going to write it down, but shout out to Makiko. She crushed it. And I was like, fuck, I spend hours trying to distill concepts in 60 seconds and I just couldn't figure it out. And then she told me that. I was like, fuck, that's it. So that's awesome. That's like a beautiful orange pill moment.
So this is the stuff that I'm excited for 2024. This is it. It's the public perception. And I don't know about you, but doesn't it feel like we're not criminals anymore? Now that the Sam Bankman-Fried stuff, it seems like we've distanced ourselves from that from a time standpoint. Like it's been a year since that was in the news. And it's also, I think, relatively clear to people that Bitcoin didn't really have anything to do with that. It was not the same thing.
You'd be surprised, man.
But I'm saying that, tepidly. Like it does seem we are different. The Bitcoin and the other stuff is different, and it does seem to be more of an understanding of that than there was last year.
Real quick, Keegan messaged me here, and he thinks
right block?
that it was block 157,301. I don't have that number. It's not quite there. So maybe DM me and like show me how you got that.
Proof of work.
I got a completely different one. But you're getting close, I think. I'll have to check my other DMs and stuff. But again, whoever gets it, 10,000 sats. All right. I wanted to put in one thing because this is a catalyst that I see, and maybe it's already priced in. But I think it's important for Bitcoin because Bitcoin gets lumped in with all these other assets where, liquidity is part of the picture. We talked in the end of year wrap up show how I thought the biggest news in finance from last year was this BTFP thing. This is the Federal Reserve saying, hey, we know a lot of like your bonds are underwater. We'll give you the cash on par value for your bond if you need it. And right out the gate during the bank runs, everyone took it, slow grind up. All of a sudden in October, this thing's ripped, and it's really ripped in the last like 2-3
hasn't
weeks
slowed
too.
down.
So
it's just not slowing down.
It's going insane. And I'm kind of curious, like if I look at this chart, like it just chilled, and then all of a sudden in like October, maybe there was some signaling that these assets are going to stay underwater for a while somewhere. This number just started to rip. And I think to me, this is the market. I think the market sees something like this and says, hey, the Fed is going to provide an unlimited backstop to the most important liquidity in the market. And if that's the case, and let's just say we're another bank, we have all this rotten stuff on our balance sheet, but we are getting inflows, we're not going to double down on the bonds. We're just going to keep putting it into the stuff that actually works. And I think I just have a clue in that that's kind of what's going on. I think that's why S&P 500 hit all-time highs today. NASDAQ's been ripping, all these other stocks, and it feels like risk on, even though we're at 5% interest rates. I think it's because the Fed showed their hand and said, hey, we are not going to let another COVID-like liquidity event happen. And hell, we might not even let a mini recession happen too. Everyone else is going to have to suck it up with the interest rates. If their mortgage sucks, it sucks, but we'll cross that bridge when it gets there if it causes a crisis. But for now, we're not going to let these banks go under because I think they really fear a bank run. I think there's just like the living daylights were scared out of them when those banks collapsed. And that's why they acted so quick for this backstop. You saw all the tech bros, especially because they were all in Silicon Valley Bank, really lose their minds. And this program, it was created in March 15th of last year. They said it was going to be a 1-year program. We got 2 months. And I think it just goes without saying, like, this thing is going to be extended past a year. There's no limit to how much cash they can create to assist these people. And I think the market,
to be clear,
says, hey, it's over.
We were talking about this before the show, but for people listening, it's at about $175 billion. This program right now?
Yeah.
180. That sounds like a lot of money.
It's not.
It actually is
it's
not.
A signal.
It's actually
it's a signal.
Exactly. That's it. It's the signal to itself. It's not a ton of money. Like this is not trillions of dollars. This is not even 200 billion. Like it's insane that we're saying these things, right? Like, oh, 180 billion dollars. It's not a lot of money, but it's true.
When there's like tens of trillions of bonds, it's
unbelievable, right? It's unbelievable. I agree with you. I agree with you that this is definitely a signal of risk on. This is a signal from the Fed saying, okay, guys, we got your back. I agree with that. But I have something else about this program. And this is not my idea. This is not my idea. I think it was on Zero Hedge this morning or yesterday that banks are being encouraged to use this program because it's a signaling mechanism. It's kind of like the Scarlet Letter, right? If you're just one or two banks use this program, then people can say like, oh, look, that bank used this program. They must be in some sort of trouble. It kind of it signals, oh, those guys are in trouble. But if everybody uses the program, right?
It's
if everybody
standard,
then it's just a standard thing, right? So if
man, I love that. I didn't even think about it like that.
I wonder if this since October, that run up since October, this is just banks that don't even need this program using it because they're being encouraged to do that, so that the ugly, the ugly ducklings in the pond don't get spotted.
Yeah, I like that theory, and I totally subscribe to that. I think it's like, I mean, this is not like a one-to-one comparison, but it's sort of like the COVID programs where you were inspired to just take them even if you didn't quite need them. Anybody could have gotten
like that.
It's exactly
Canada. Like that. It's exactly.
And then they said, hey, we're going to forgive everyone. Like there's no criteria for okay. So it's like in Canada, we had this one where you could borrow 60,000 from the government if you could prove you needed it. And then they said, hey, we're going to forgive 20,000, but there was no merit-based reason to forgive the 20,000. Like
now, can you imagine this is a program like that? It's one thing to do that.
Forgiven. It doesn't matter if you're BlackRock or me.
It's one thing if you're doing that to restaurants, because you're as a consumer, as a customer, your relationship to a restaurant is limited to an hour that you're there to eat your meal and leave. The moment you pay, you're done with that. Your relationship with that restaurant is essentially done, right? Like you might come back next week, but you don't need to. With banks, it's a little bit different. If you put your money in a bank, if you put $10 million in the bank, and all of a sudden that bank is the only bank in the country using this program, which is created to help banks who are distressed, well, that sends a signal to you.
It's like you have the Scarlet Letter, basically.
Yeah. My $10 million in that bank is maybe not that safe. So I will then take that money out and I will go to another bank, causing a bank run if everybody does that. But
this is a really good point.
Everybody is using that bank. If every single bank in the country is using that program, even if it's just for a little bit of money, even if it's just for what's a couple of $1 billion between friends, right? Like what's a couple of billies, right? It's nothing.
Well, and this is like the beauty of the Federal Reserve technically being like a private institution, right? Like I ran this story on one of my shorts. There was a Bloomberg journalist named Mark Pittman, and he wanted the Federal Reserve. He sued the Federal Reserve for transparency because he wanted to know how much in loans they were giving out to JP Morgan and a lot of these banks in crisis. And they said, hey, we're a private institution, the Federal Reserve, we don't have to do this. And he said, no, the American people deserve to know. He wins the lawsuit against the Federal Reserve, dies 3 months later from a heart attack, but we won't get into that territory. But the point being is that the Federal Reserve has this immunity to transparency. So right now, like to your point, even if we wanted to figure out who's borrowing from this program, like the Fed just says, nah, we don't have to provide those numbers. The government doesn't make us provide the names of the banks who are borrowing from this. So you couldn't even figure it out if you wanted to, right? But if it was like high criteria, you probably could narrow it down and then you might spur another bank run because people are worried. But because it's like anybody can borrow from this thing, we're going to lower the criteria, but we're going to keep all your names private. No bank run, everyone borrows, has a fun freak fiesta because of it. But it's just rotten. Like the Federal Reserve, it operates in this just disgustingly obnoxious gray area where it's just immune from basically anything. Like there's no public accountability. As a private entity, it doesn't follow the same rules as other private corporations or private banks. and you just get away with murder on certain things. It's just it's like it's out in the open shadow government program, basically.
It is neither
And it's
federal nor
darkening.
does it hold reserves, right? It's the Federal
No,
Reserve.
no,
But
it's
the
crazy.
banking, the
Go
banking
read the what is it, the monster from Jekyll
creature,
Island or the
creature
creature
from
from
Jekyll
Jekyll
Island.
Island? Holy shit! Like, whoa.
But banking in general has become so the risk and the incentives and the risks are so intertwined and they're so perverse. Even if you're JP Morgan, you're top of the food chain, you're Goldman Sachs, you're the best of the best. If Silicon Valley Bank goes down in like a blaze of glory, like dramatically goes down, you are affected by that, right? Their risks are intertwined. Like these people have derivatives on top of derivatives on top of each other's derivatives, right? Nobody wants a bank run. Nobody wants any of these banks to go bankrupt or to have any problems whatsoever, because the risk will trickle up, right? Like it'll collapse, right? Everybody, how many people haven't seen The Big Short? Like, go watch The Big Short. Watch it tonight if you haven't watched it before. Like,
because the banking system's not back. There's nothing backing it. It's all faith, and it's just like if faith is lost in one corner, then faith is lost in all corners.
And the risk is all over the place. The risk is everywhere. One bank holds another bank's like risk, right? And it's all over the place. And the moment it starts to unravel, it all unravels, right? So I don't know. Is that even a conspiracy theory on that? Like,
it's not. It's not. It's like they LARP transparency when like Elizabeth Warren's like, oh, I did one significant thing in my tenure. I made banks transparent. It's just like, really? Like, is our banking system that much more transparent than it was in 2007? I don't think so. I don't think anyone thinks so. But we've talked on this show quite a bit about market breadth, and how, now that we have all these like backstops, the money's just flowing to the winners, right? Like it's the Magnificent Seven, basically. It's the, passive S&P and NASDAQ. The banks seem to be getting some of the funds flowing too, but there's a lot of a weakness that underlies all of it still. And I thought this was interesting. I'll share this chart real quick. Now, this is a China company, so they don't get the passive inflows that all the American companies get. Alibaba is trading at a lower price to sales ratio than Campbell's Soup, which is insane. It's a consumer good company that's been around for like, almost 200 years, versus a tech stock. And it's because I don't want to get into the whole China situation, but China is not backstopping public companies nearly as aggressively as the Fed is. They do backstop banks quite a bit there. But they don't care. If Alibaba goes to zero, I don't think the Communist Party cares, honestly.
Think about what you just said. The government of China is not backing their companies as much as the Federal Reserve is.
Yeah,
and I agree with you.
Yeah. So in some ways, communist China is taking a more laissez-faire approach to their public tech companies than America is. What does that tell you about the state of our economy? Pretty wild.
So S&P is at an all-time high, but if I'm not mistaken, the Chinese markets are way down. Like way down.
Wrecked. Mind
European markets? Where are the European markets? Kind of wavering.
I saw another chart. Apparently, at this point, NVIDIA now has a bigger weighting in the S&P than the entire energy sector, or NASDAQ, or one of those. But that's how big NVIDIA has gotten. It's now worth more than all the energy public providers, that are.
What's the price of sales on NVIDIA? $250?
Who cares? I mean, like the demand for that stuff's just like, that's just gonna keep going out of control, and then you have to figure out the valuation. But I mean, the company's fine. they're going nowhere. They're not going anywhere. But yeah, crazy world. Just the winners just keep winning, and the losers just getting stepped on, man. And I guess that brings us into the next segment. Like, that inevitably pushes people to populism in some way. And Milei, he won the election. We didn't do a show about it. I don't think I was around. He won the election, not in a landslide, but I think like 56% of the vote. He's now president of Argentina, has already done a lot. Like, I think he cut 360,000 regulations, fired 5,000 government employees. he got invited to the World Economic Forum, and that's been the video making the rounds on Twitter this week. So he gets invited to the World Economic Forum, which we know has been dominated by a lot of like left-leaning, leaders from Europe. Justin Trudeau talking about all these different new mechanisms for control. How can we get people to reduce their carbon footprint? How can we stop misinformation? How can we stop this? How can we coerce people into this, method of life that we deem approvable and nice and all this stuff? And I saw this funny video, and I think it was like a Native American woman, and she was like doing this ceremonial thing where she was like blowing on people's heads.
I saw that. Yeah.
And someone commented, it was like, how did we go from like 6 feet apart and masks to like blowing on people's faces on a stage in like 2 years? But this speech is great. If you look up Javier Milei, World Economic Forum speech, it's essentially, he is in front of a whole bunch of like collectivists, as he would call them, globalists, pro-socialist leaders, saying, hey, socialism in the last century has led to the most poverty, and capitalism has eradicated the most poverty. And I know a bunch of you in this room might be, part of the socialist crowd, but we need to reject it. We need to embrace capitalism. It's the only moral and ethical way forward. And the Western world's in danger. We have to embrace free enterprise capitalism. And I thought it was pretty epic. And if you look at YouTube, it's like the most viewed speech from the World Economic Forum
by a
the
lot,
tone,
by an order of magnitude. Yeah,
the tone there is different. But yeah, hey, you told me before, you're like, I don't know about this. You've always been a little skeptical of Milei. What's the story there? Why do you?
First of all,
like he's not the real deal?
This is absolutely a net positive. I'm not saying it's a negative.
The message is good.
The message is good. It's good to have this message out there in front at the World Economic Forum, regardless of what I think about this guy or not. Like, it's a net positive that he's there having these discussions and saying this out loud. And it's great that it has hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. It's awesome. I think it's good. That being said, politicians aren't going to fix this, guys.
No.
Don't put your faith in politicians. Just don't.
But you said it's a psyop. Did you say it's a psyop?
Yeah.
So what's the psyop with Milei? Like, why
I don't
do you
know.
think that there's...
Why would they let him? Like, why? Why would they invite him?
Well, they also invited Republican congressman, like the clip you sent me to, the Kevin Roberts clip. We'll pull that up. So I think like they don't want to come off as just sharing one worldview. And he's the newly elected president of Argentina.
Since when? This is a new thing, because like for the past couple of years, they were very keen on having one worldview.
Before I say that, you're telling me that no one who's like a pro-capitalist, slightly right-wing person has ever spoken at Davos? I don't think so. I don't think anybody like an anarcho-capitalist has, but there also haven't been any anarcho-capitalists anywhere of note.
I'm not saying that. I'm sure there's been plenty of people, like there's obviously a lot of business leaders that go there, and
Trump spoke at it, right? So.
Yeah, a ton. But why are they giving this guy the forum? And not only did they give him the podium, Klaus Schwab introduced him.
Mm-hmm.
Klaus Schwab gave him the.
What are you going to do? Say, President of Argentina can't speak here?
I don't know. It just seems a little bit. Like I was saying before the show, when people want something, they push until people start pushing back. Mm-hmm. And then the moment people start pushing back, the abuser kind of takes a step back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we are. And I think that's where we are. Look, I hope things are better. Like, I have no clue what's gone on in the past couple of years, like what's gone on in the past 3 or 4 years. And I don't know what these people at Davos do. I don't know. I don't waste my energy thinking about it, to be honest. I really don't. I got more than enough things to worry about, more than enough things to think about. But that being said, it's a lot of weird stuff has happened in the past little while. And I'm not all of a sudden going to clap for these people for allowing this politician a stage. And I'm not going to think that I'm not going to forget all the stuff that's happened over the past couple of years.
Oh no, and I'm not saying
You know?
that. I'm not saying that at all. I just
But
think
I
it's
think it's
not.
positive. I think it's a net positive.
I don't
I'm
think
not
that there's
arguing.
a ulterior motive. I just think that there isn't an ulterior motive on behalf of the World Economic Forum to let him speak. I think it was just maybe we should just let other people on this stage, so we don't.
I
Seem as
hope you're
biased.
right.
I just don't think it's like, oh, we're gonna goad people into thinking, you know, free market capitalism is good, and then we're gonna create a false flag and then make this guy look like an idiot. Like, I just don't think there's anything remotely like that happening in this situation.
I hope
Maybe
you're right.
I'm aloof. So
I hope you're right. And again,
yeah.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a really good thing that he went up there and he spoke. And I listened to the speech twice and I liked it. It was a really good speech.
Did you
I do wish
see
he
those
wouldn't have
AI
just
translations? Those
yeah,
were
it's amazing,
so cool.
Right? Yeah, it's amazing.
Those are amazing. So they like input his voice to an AI thing and they like copy his accent but make him speak English for the whole speech.
Now,
So cool.
now I'm going to go full on conspiracy theory.
All right, shoot.
I was a little bit weirded out by how little energy he had. He's just sitting there reading the thing. Why wasn't he engaged? Like, this is the same guy that had a chainsaw at his rallies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this guy was like super energetic, super like let's go, like a piñata. Didn't he beat a piñata with a baseball bat or something? It was a piñata of the central bank or something.
I have a theory on this. Because it was the same deal with the Tucker Carlson interview. You watch that with Javier Milei?
Yeah.
He was very muted in that as well. And then you can see his acceptance speech. I think he's like me. He's like kind of like partial introvert. And it's really all about like, do you have that internal energy? And the guy, you know, he's delivered fiery speeches in front of massive crowds, but the times that I've seen him the most fiery have been on talk shows where he's like one-on-one with people and he can just like dig into them.
I'm not saying
so much
that
these massive events.
I'm not saying that he should have been on the stage at Davos with a chainsaw. That's not what I'm saying. Like that would have been wild. Like that would have been insane. I'm not saying that, but I would have liked him to look a little more like a world leader. He did not look like the president of a country, and he did not look like someone who really wanted to be there. He looked like he was just going through the paces. And I really like the speech.
I think that's the thing. He's just a weird dude. Like, he's not, and that's my thing. Like, that's how I've justified in my head. Like, the guy, have you seen when he takes selfies with people?
No, but I can imagine.
Have you seen that? Okay, look up Javier Milei. Here, I'll show you what I mean. He does like a duck face, and then he like puts his thumbs up. It's the weirdest expression. Look at this. Every selfie he does this. And it's like what is that face? Like, what are you doing?
I don't know about the face, but like I especially when you're posing with younger women, making sure that everyone can see your two hands, that's a good move. Like that's a safe move. always keep the hands in view. Like that's a good move.
But he looks like so serious, and it's this like weird thing with like pursing his lips. I don't know, man. I think I don't want to get too in the weeds. If I was to pick something, I would say there's like just a slight bit of autism there. That's all. I got a little autism too, you know, every now and then.
80 IQ for the win.
I'm not just joking about it. I was diagnosed with it at some point, but it's never been a big issue for me. I just detect it a little bit, and I think it's okay. And I think that's why sometimes in front of certain audiences, he's not like, afuera, viva la libertad, carajo. He's like, he can't do that every single speech unless you're truly like super extrovert, like performer politician all the time. He's a performer. The guy's a performer, but that doesn't mean that he's going to be the same everywhere he goes.
Okay, I'm with you, but he didn't need to just stand up at the podium with his head. And I like the words. The speech was great, but like there was no energy to that whatsoever. None.
I think he was nervous. I just give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, I just think he was like a little nervous.
He's running around with a chainsaw at his
but
rallies.
That's in your own country. It's completely different. It's his own country.
But at the World Economic Forum, you're this anarcho-capitalist. You just won an election.
Do you think that guy doesn't think that people are out there that want to assassinate him? For sure. He probably thinks about that. I don't know. I'm playing devil's advocate here. I just think, like, you know, we can talk and say, if I was going to give a speech to the World Economic Forum, I'd all call them a bunch of like dirt slurping globalists and flip them off. I just don't think.
Well, you wouldn't do that if you were one of them.
No, but if I was invited just as Julian to make a speech to them, I don't think I would do that either. I think I'd be a little nervous. I don't care if I was the president of Argentina or a guy who makes YouTube videos. It's just like, you know, he's just thrust in the situation. Maybe I'm just trying to be a little empathetic to him. I just don't think like.
And I'm not saying like I don't know if he's one of them or not. Like one of them, like whatever them are. Look, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I don't know this guy. I didn't know who he was 8 months ago, 9 months ago, whatever it was. Just when he came on the scene, that's all I know. I think it's good. I think, like I said, good speech.
Sorry, yeah,
that's okay.
Sovereign energy in the chat.
How many sats you get out of that one? How many have you got?
Things. Dude, I got like 5,000 sats the other day from one of them. It was sick. Not a sponsor of the show. You guys can sponsor me anytime you like, though. I don't know. I've just seen such a range of interviews from him, and it's like he's just different in every interview. He really is not the same. Like, everyone loves to post that one where he's like, oh, leftards are shit and all this, but he doesn't speak like that anymore. Like, he's very tacit and calculated, and you can hear him like pause and think a lot more. But when he's on these other, you know, these local talk shows, he just rattles off. He's speaking at twice the pace. He's just like a guy like Vivek Ramaswamy or Trump or Biden. Like, they're kind of the same in every interview. Milei is not. So
I'm not saying that he, again, I'm repeating myself. I'm not saying he should have been insane. I'm just saying that he could have at least looked up at the camera. He could have made eye contact with the people that he's talking about. Like, he's calling these people socialists and he's calling them out on their policies, but he's not even making eye contact.
Here's my prediction: is I think he will be more. I think he will be more emboldened. Is that the right term? I think he'll be more emboldened a little deeper into his presidency, because he'll say, hey, Argentinians came from this complete state of shock and disposition, and we've turned the country around. And I have the confidence. Like, he can't come and project this vision that he's like fixed Argentina already. But once you've kind of done that a little bit, then you can come and say, listen up, globalists.
Agreed.
Clue in, you know? Like Bukele, right? Like maybe that's a good example, is like, look back at Bukele's speeches when he got into office on global stages versus now. Like, he's fired up. He knows, he's like so confident in himself. Look at his candor now versus like 2019. I think people change. I think the office changes you a little bit. So I see it. I think he'll be back at the World Economic Forum and he'll look them dead in the eyes.
I think we can agree on this, that we haven't made a decision yet on this guy. It's a wait and see. It's a wait and see. I think we agree. We can agree on that. Let's wait and see. It's good. I think we agree it's good that he's around. We think it's a fresh air. It's a breath of fresh air. But let's wait and see.
My one thing that I'm not too keen on him for, because I hate it when presidents and politicians sort of like, you know, do lip service or just kind of like photo ops, is he's taking public airplanes, and it's supposed to be like, oh, the country has no money, the president's going to get on like public planes. And to me, it's like so disingenuous. Like, I don't care how much it costs to have a private jet. You should not be putting the largest decision maker of your country on a commercial airline. I know that it's like, oh, it's like
that's
the Argentinian people. That's
a bit of a hot take from you. I like that one.
I like that, dude. I'm sorry. Like, senators and congressmen, that's one thing, but not the president. The president should not be hopping on commercial jets with all these people. Huge security risk. I get like a psycho on there from the backseat decides to strangle him or whatever. Like, and it doesn't even look like he's surrounded by Secret Service when he does this.
And here's added to your hot take. It's putting the other passengers at risk.
It is, totally.
Right?
It's like, if I know Milei is going to be on a plane, like, you know?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Like I like this hot take. The moment you said it, I'm like, no, I disagree. But the more I think about it, the more no. I agree. I now agree with you.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. I think it's like a little temporary thing. I hope he like, you know, kind of just goes back to whatever presidents do. I mean, presidents have like every president has a plane. So it's not like he sold the private jet. Like he's just not paying for the fuel and the pilot maybe for like a couple months. Like, okay. Like that's nothing on the line item. But I get it. Like it's a little bit it's projecting this image of the Argentinians, like I'm of the people, but people are smart. Like they get that with him, I think. I think he's well known enough that he doesn't have to play those games, but who am I to judge? I'm not a political consultant. I want to wrap this up because we're going about an hour here. I think my big takeaway from him going to the World Economic Forum, making this speech, is that I really feel like 2023 was this turning of the tides moment where it finally became somewhat okay for the first time in like 5 to 7 years for big institutions and elites to reject wokeism. And I don't really know who started it. Some might say, oh, it's like ever since Musk bought Twitter, it made it okay for, you know, big shots and public people that weren't explicitly conservative to say like F the DEI movement. But like, man, it's come like really full stop. Like, you know, Bill Ackman going after these people, scorched earth, BlackRock basically pulling all their ESG and State Street here. They're pulling all their like ESG funds, shutting them down, saying, you know, Larry Fink was saying, the word got weaponized. Like we're not too into it. The rejection of all these like woke campaigns from Bud Light, and then Disney, like people are voting with their feet on Disney, like absolute disaster for them last year. Not, I think like one film made over $1 billion for them, which is coming off like 4 years ago, it was 7 films. People are tired of it. And I think a lot of people have been tired of it for a while, but now it's getting to be okay to say that. And it's not like I need permission to be okay to say it. I've been calling this shit out forever. You too. But now I think public consensus is like, this was like a wrong move and this isn't sustainable. And I think it's just because you can't lie. You can't keep a lie going, especially if the incentives don't align and the money doesn't align around it. It's like the go woke, go broke thing. Someone coined that term in 2018. And I think it took about 5 years for it to finally be unsustainable. It's like throwing money into, you know, a burning building. Eventually the money just runs out and the support for
one
stuff
thing
dries up.
When interest rates are 0, it's one thing. When interest rates are 5%, it's a totally different thing.
Oh, that'd be a really good topic for a video, is like how the Fed killed wokeism by making economics more real. I wonder if there's like a way to write that out. That's a good recognition of something there. But like, you know, you have the rise of the populace, Milei, Geert Wilders or whatever, in the Netherlands, all these woke turns, Sports Illustrated.
I was just going to
they just fire their entire staff, you know, after putting a bunch of like she-males on their front page.
Target as well. The Target, Bud Light, Disney, you mentioned Disney was a big one. It's a long list.
And you have even these like blue state mayors, which were just like, we're an open city. We want like everyone here, all the migrants, like we're not going to reject anyone based on like race, heritage, whatever. Now Eric Adams is saying like, whoa, like, hold on. Like maybe Biden should do something about the border crisis. And he's getting like tossed under the bridge now by local media. But I mean, he's right. Like the border crisis is like a whole other can of worms, but people are getting little like they're waking up to this stuff. And they're saying,
it's not just in the US. That's in Canada too. Like the premier of Quebec yesterday, being critical about just saying like, Quebec can't handle this many asylum seekers. Like we're tapped out here. So it's not just in the US.
I'm a split position on this because I think actually like, you know, like the libertarian position is that it's like pro-immigration, pro-open borders essentially, because it's just like if these people are going to come to the country and contribute, then there will be room for them. They'll create enough economic output to survive here. The problem is when everything for asylum seekers is subsidized, it comes from the government, it comes at the expense of all of the working class and the working people. And that's when it's unsustainable. And then you have all these things like Canada's big thing with that is like, I think we can handle immigrants here. It's not like we don't have the landmass for them. It's just that we don't have the will to actually build houses for them, or they're not coming with like enough capital or work to make the money to build their own shelters, and then us getting out of the way to make them, allow them to afford that type of thing.
And we may or may not be like allowing the correct type of worker.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm not an expert on this at all.
Yeah. Like it's like the half measures that make all these things unsustainable. It's not the act of like allowing asylum seekers in of itself to come in. That's the problem. It's just like, it's the half measures when they get here that are, turning the sentiment against them and against everyone else. So, I don't know. I'll wrap up my rant, and I'm curious to hear your take on this. My whole point on all this is I think that this period that we had of like pretty harsh totalitarianism, which was like in the form of passports and mandatory vaccines, all that's kind of like worn off. And then the truth has emerged from all these situations. And so like there are more people today that say, I will never, ever wear a mask than there was in 2018 before a pandemic. There's more people today that are anti-vax than there were before the pandemic. There's more people who reject everything that comes out of the lip of the government's mouth than there were in 2019. And that leads to an overall sense of fearlessness among people. And when people aren't afraid of things, they gravitate in every situation and every choice to freedom, right? The freedom to transact, the freedom to speak, the freedom to move. And that ripples across politics, and that ripples across, individual decision-making. And it's like you were saying beginning of the show, it's like, it feels that, we keep marching towards totalitarianism and complete rule over people and domination. And that maybe every now and then it's like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And maybe we're just living the 1 step back moment. But I guess what I'll contest with that is that if you zoom out long enough, I think we're accelerating towards freedom, and there's bumps along the way, but Bitcoin's a big part of that. With monetary freedom, I think people are freer now than 500 years ago to say whatever the hell they wanted, and they have a bigger platform to do it on, and they can reach more people than ever before. So it's like all a matter of perspective. Like I think if you zoom into 30 years, it feels like, yeah, the West has fallen. But if you zoom out to like 100 or 200 years, it just looks like a blip in the road. And I guess that's sort of like where you have to pick your battles and figure out, where are we? Am I going to be a pessimist because the last 30 years look crappy? Or am I going to be an optimist because the last 400 years look amazing? And we're just dealing with some hitches that come with all that increased, responsibility over our actions. So yeah, I'm curious what you think.
I agree. Like I don't have a ton to add. I agree. Like it's not just freedom, it's truth. Mm-hmm. And technology enables us now to have access to so much more information than ever before. Mm-hmm. So it's truth is a little bit like water. It's really hard to stop once it starts flowing, right? And with information, there's a ton of misinformation, or I hate that word now, right? But there's truth out. The truth is out there somewhere, and we're learning. I hate waking up. Like we're learning. We're accessing all this truth and all this information, and I agree with you. I think we're headed in the right direction. I really do. I'm optimistic.
Yeah, it again, like going back to the Elon Musk thing, like him being in charge of Twitter has made it a lot harder for centralized actors to push false narratives. And like we might not agree or love Elon, but like that was a big move and a courageous move that he did, because it could have just remained the same. And then every single mainstream communication platform would censor regular truths on the daily. Now we have Nostr, right?
And things are coming out, right? Like like I watch parliamentary committee meetings, and I watch some congressional meetings in the US. They're talking about things that 2 or 3 years ago would not have been talked about. Mm. And I agree with you. I think it has a lot to do with Elon having Twitter. And people, you can only fool people for so long. Yeah. Right? And especially when the people can communicate with each other. It's one thing like
lies are much more expensive than the truth.
Yes. And you got to keep people apart if you really want to fool them, because I might be suspicious of something, but I haven't quite 100% figured out the thought, and I'm not quite sure. If I'm just left to myself and I consume nothing but whatever local media is telling me or whatever CBC is telling me, then maybe I'll veer back onto the narrative that whoever wants me to be on. But if I have friends all over the world who are also kind of iffy about this stuff, and I'm able to talk to them, I'm able to reach them in some way and bounce ideas off of them and have, Friday afternoon discussions like this with them, then maybe I'm less likely to go back on that path of the mainstream narrative.
Exactly.
And that's a good thing. That's definitely a good thing.
And we're making the money bypass all those borders. We're making the communication channels bypass all those borders. I was working on a short today. I think like the thing that people should really be spending more time on is the things that you can't, just delegate to the internet and decentralized protocols, which is like, they want you to eat a certain food in a certain way, right? So you go to the superstore, you can only find, X brand of apples or whatever. Like some of this decentralization and finding the truth in health and in food has to come from efforts done locally, right? So, you can be connected to the world of Bitcoiners and you can be connected through Nostr, but like that's not going to solve your food censorship problem. Like you have to go out and find the farmers to get real food, right? Yep. And then real neighbors and real people in your economic circle that can help you do things so that they can't censor you for having an opinion. But it's coming and people are going to pick up on all this stuff and freedom, man. Like I'm very optimistic about the future. You'll get these like little news stories of the week, which it'll like shake you to your core because something crazy that you never thought and would happen and you lose faith in humanity for a bit. But you always got to keep the long view and the accomplishments that we have had as Bitcoiners and people just seeking freedom. The wins keep stacking up for humanity at large.
And nobody goes the other way.
No.
Right? Nobody gets exposed to freedom. No one gets exposed to freedom and gets exposed to the truth, whatever the truth is.
Not within the same generation, at least. It can get lost between generations.
Yeah, like that freedom thing. Like, yeah, I liked it the other way better. Like that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen.
No. It's too good. It's too good. All right. I want to end this. We're going a little long on one last tweet because I always love to boost us Bitcoiners up. This is a David Bailey tweet. Some people don't like him because he likes ordinals, but I don't care. If Bitcoin was a nation, population larger than Germany, average age around 35 years old. We gotta get that down a little bit. Population growth 20%, GDP growth 50%, no debt, most billionaires per capita, most developers per capita, internet native, controls 1% of global energy, and industrial growing at 60% a year. How are you not bullish? I love that. That's such an interesting way of looking at the Bitcoin scene.
And contrarian thinkers, right?
Yeah.
Bitcoiner, 80 IQ for the win.
Contrarian thinkers. And people always have disagreements in the Bitcoin space over like little things. But I haven't met too many people that even call them toxic maxis who will like treat you like dirt in person almost ever. If you have disagreements, you just move on. And that's what it's all about, right? So yeah, awesome. Oh, I feel jazzed up. I'm glad to get back into the live streaming thing. Maybe we'll do one next week too. Yeah.
I'm free Friday afternoons anytime. Just let me know. You just have to let me know a day in advance and I'll be here.
I will. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show, what we covered here. And I'll check my messages. But again, if you missed it, we're doing a 10,000 sat giveaway. Again, I don't know if someone's got the answer right yet. I have to check all my messages. 10,000 sat giveaway. If you can tell me the block number or the block height that Satoshi made his last message on bitcointalk.org on. So you got to find the date and the post that was, find the time, and then find the block around that time. And you win 10,000 sats. You just need to give me an LN URL. But I'll check. Maybe someone's claimed it already. We had one attempt, didn't quite get it. But yeah, we'll do more of this in the shows as well. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Thanks so much for coming on, Boomer. Take care. Enjoy your weekends, people. Peace.